Hey guys, this is Ben, Rowsdowersavesus, and this is the deconversion of Joddem. About 3 years ago, I attended a lecture at my school called Scientific Evidence for the Existence of God. I didn't know at that time that it was hosted by a fundamentalist, i.e. terrorist, group called Campus Crusade for Christ. At the time, I was largely skeptical of the idea of God, but was convinced by a wretched abuse of philosophy that there must be some sort of God. The speaker gave a presentation on the cosmological argument, which he passed off as his own, and ignored the flaws inherent in it, which are obvious to anyone who has studied philosophy. At any rate, I became a Christian and started going to church regularly. For the next 2.5 years, I missed church maybe twice. I also went to the young adult group at my church. It was there that I started to realize that Christianity was a scam. My pastor raised $400 in donations for a visiting friend, but when I read in the paper about a man put on the streets due to non-payment of rent, precipitated by the fact that he couldn't work as some low-life piece of shit stole his dialysis machine, and asked the church if they could help that man, I was met with a, "We don't do that sort of thing." I should mention that prior to this, I started noticing how ridiculous some of the preachings were. After worship music, which was always the same 3 chords ad nauseum, sometimes in different arrangements or keys, sometimes not, our pastors would always preach about how to worship God fully with the music, and let it be an individual thing. How can it be an individual thing when we're all singing the same damn song? If it were real worship at all, as they suggested, random people would get up on stage and sing/play as the Holy Spirit directed them. Of course, there is no Holy Spirit, or a holy anything for that matter, so that got me thinking. Anyway, now that I've gone off on this massive tangent, I will get to the secant. The church wouldn't pay for this man's dialysis machine despite the fact that hundreds of thousands of dollars get donated to it per year. At this point, I reasoned that either the tithe money was going to the pastor or whoever the pastor was imbecile enough to give it to. The next month, I was behind on rent, and I prayed to God for help. God never came through. I went to a church and asked for help. And since I hadn't been to church in a while, and never to that particular one, the pastor there immediately assumed that I was a drug addict and gave me nothing. Gee, I thought the Holy Spirit was supposed to reveal the truth. In a way, the Holy Spirit did reveal the truth to me. And that truth was that the church is the biggest scam in history. I took that all in stride, and then I took a philosophy of religion class. I loved that class. I actually got to see a well-to-do Muslim girl take off her veil. It was so exciting seeing somebody oppressed for so long take steps towards ending it. Through the course of the course, I realized that no idea of God was metaphysically or logically possible. I effectively learned that God, if he existed, was a square circle. I hadn't taken the leap of anti-faith at that point, though. I wanted to believe in God so desperately. After all, this was an imaginary friend that I loved. I started going on YouTube and looking for videos on atheism, as I figured that they would pose the strongest views opposite mine. Also, as an intelligent Christian, I live by the maxim, what faith is faith that cannot stand against any opposition? I looked for all the opposition, and having learned about 2 years' worth of philosophy at that point, I realized the apologetics literature had nothing to offer. I eventually found the Rational Response Squad and admitted to myself and everyone who would listen that I was an atheist, and have never been happier about who I am.